After 30 years, a wealthy woman reconnects with her father following an incident where she insulted an elderly beggar. Hello, everyone. Take pleasure in these calming moments as you watch. What do you want? Isabella, the restaurant manager, shouted sarcastically, her voice dripping with disdain. The old man looked up, pain in his eyes, and quietly replied, I just ask for a little food. I'm very hungry. This isn't a place for beggars like you. It's a fine dining establishment. Isabella shot back coldly. Get lost. The old man remained silent, merely lowering his head slightly, but his eyes bore into Isabella with profound sorrow. This sight did not move Isabella. Instead, it made her increasingly uncomfortable, feeling that the old man was ruining the restaurant's atmosphere. Leave now, or I'll call security, she yelled again. Hugh, the burly-looking manager, approached from behind, observing the situation. Without inquiring further, he marched over and shoved the old man outside. Get out! Hugh barked. Don't dirty up this classy place. The old man struggled to maintain his stability, but pain and fatigue forced him to collapse onto the cold tile floor. Hugh wasn't finished. He even flicked a used cigarette butt at the old man before turning his back, utterly indifferent to the scene he had created. What can we do? Hugh arrogantly remarked to Isabella. He's probably insane, always begging in upscale establishments like this. Isabella turned away, still annoyed, shaking her head as if nothing significant had transpired. Yet, before she could leave, the old man murmured something that made her momentarily pause. I am your father, he declared, sending a wave of shock through Isabella's heart. However, she quickly dismissed the thought, chalking it up to the delirious ramblings of a deranged man. She resumed her duties, appearing entirely unfazed by the earlier episode. Nevertheless, the image of the elderly man and his sorrowful eyes lingered in Isabella's mind throughout the evening. The affluent customers came and went, none of them caring about what had just occurred, and the restaurant continued its flawless operation. In a quiet corner, Lucy, a young waitress, could not tear her gaze away. She had witnessed the old man being thrust outside, and her heart ached at the bravado of Isabella and Hugh. Quietly, she slipped to the kitchen, gathered some leftover food, and exited to give it to the old man. But upon her arrival, the area was empty, there was no sign of him. Guilt surged within Lucy, but she felt powerless to change the situation as the thought of the old man lingered in her mind. Meanwhile, the old man stood alone in the frigid night air, his eyes hollow and tired, receiving no assistance. He was exhausted, staring into the distance like a hopeless wanderer lost in the dark. No one noticed him, not even Isabella, who had seen how he was treated. The enchanted restaurant continued to serve its patrons, and both Isabella and Hugh returned to work as if the tragic scene had never happened. Dinner at the Enchanted carried on in opulence, surrounded by aristocratic patrons blissfully unaware of the earlier events. This space was reserved for relishing exquisite cuisine, flaunting their wealth, and mingling with their peers, rendering anything beyond this scope unimportant and trivial. Inside the restaurant, only perfection was acceptable. There was no room for disorder or anything considered unsightly. Isabella stood in the management area, maintaining her icy composure. She was unfazed by the recent event, having grown accustomed to imposing strict regulations at her job. After all, she was managing an upscale restaurant where weak emotions and unpleasant visuals simply had no place. As she maneuvered between tables, interacting with customers in a professional manner, she kept the day's events hidden. However, deep inside, a vague unease stirred within her. She could not deny that the image of the old man with his disappointed gaze continued to haunt her. Still, the wealthy diners at the restaurant savored their meals and enjoyed conversations, remaining oblivious to the homeless old man flung out earlier. They sat encircled by the luxurious ambience of the Enchanted, immersed entirely in their own world while Hugh, the restaurant manager, continued his duties without the slightest hint of guilt over his previous actions. Hugh recounted the old man's story to the staff in the kitchen, squatting like a general as he narrated the incident in a tone filled with mockery. "That old man is just a lunatic, always coming into fancy restaurants to beg. Did you guys see him? He looked like a pile of rotten trash. Kicking him out was the best choice." A few other kitchen staff members chuckled, but Lucy, the young waitress, could not remain still. She lowered her head in dismay, unwilling to continue listening while her co-workers appeared unconcerned. A sense of responsibility washed over her at the recollection of the old man's pleading eyes as he was shoved out of the restaurant, a call that had gone unanswered. Lucy felt an overwhelming tide of guilt, recalling how she had once again failed to act. She quietly took some leftovers from the kitchen and ventured outside, only to find the old man gone without a trace. She stood paralyzed, wrestling with the suffocating weight of her own indifference, struggling with why she had not acted when she had the chance. The world beyond the restaurant, where the old man might be cold and in pain, seemed to cease existing in the minds of Isabella and Hugh. Neither was keen to give thought to the incident any longer, as both returned to their duties unaffected. But when night fell, and the restaurant had emptied of its guests, Isabella finally sensed an emptiness within her. Resting in bed, the warmth of her blanket did little to alleviate the growing unrest and anxiety inside her. She kept repeating to herself that the old man was merely a crazed, homeless person, and nothing was serious. Yet his words, "I am your father," echoed hauntingly in her mind, refusing to fade. Recollections arose of her mother's tales about her father's abandonment, but she never received any details, just vague mentions of his departure and absence. Why did those words from the old man unsettle her? She was lost in confusion, caught in a maze with no discernible exit. Meanwhile, Hugh attempted to convince her of the triviality of it all, reaching out to discuss work. But Isabella struggled to focus. Her emotions conflicted. "He's just some crazy old guy. Nothing worth worrying over," Hugh said assuredly. Isabella delayed her response. Yet Hugh's words further clouded her mind as she felt caught between her mother's deceits and Hugh's nonchalance. The fragments of her life felt distorted as anxiety overwhelmed her. Sleep remained elusive. She tossed and turned, the memories of the old man's sorrowful gaze shadowing her thoughts, impossible to erase. The following morning, Isabella awoke with a heavy heart, the old man's figure lingering in her mind like an unwanted guest. She sat up in bed, her sense of disquiet persistent, perplexed over why this man's presence affected her so deeply. Was it truly that a homeless man could bring her such turmoil? Against this backdrop, she resolved to go to the enchanted restaurant. It had to remain functional. Her feelings couldn't interfere with her duties. Yet, upon entering, the air felt different. A chilling atmosphere permeated, indicating that everything had shifted. At the bar, Hugh engaged with familiar customers, and when he spotted Isabella, he wore a mocking smile, his smugness evident. "Good morning, Isabella. Hope you have a fantastic day at work," he said, sarcasm lacing his words. Isabella merely nodded, hardly acknowledging him. She ventured into the kitchen, where the staff prepared meals as if nothing amiss had happened the previous day. Despite the routine, her feeling of unease grew stronger, and she viewed the staff's silent labor as a reflection of their indifference, none concern for those cast aside by society. Standing near her now was Hugh, appearing as a representation of decay. Each word that poured from his mouth carried a tone that echoed his uncaring treatment of the old man yesterday. "That old man is probably used to being tossed out of fancy places like this," he sneered. "People like him shouldn't be welcomed here." Isabella remained immobile, speechless. Hugh's words reverberated in her mind, igniting doubts about her own existence within a realm shrouded in deception. Each glance at the delighting customers made her wonder if they felt genuine happiness or were merely indulging in a facade created by extravagant meals and vacuous dialogues. Nonetheless, she pushed those thoughts aside. She had to work, forcing herself to smile at the guests. Yet, The old man's words loomed large over her thoughts, and his presence outside that night made it feel as though reality was clouded by a heavy mist of dishonesty. Just then, Lucy re-entered the kitchen, casting a concerned gaze at Isabella. "Miss Isabella, I have an old photograph. It's a picture of the old man," she stammered. Lucy hesitated before handing over a weathered photo. The image depicted a young man, sharply dressed, yet his face felt strangely familiar. "It's Amar," Lucy stated, and Isabella realized it was the old man from the previous day, a stark contrast to the haggard figure she had encountered. Isabella stared at the photo, feeling as if the air was knocked from her lungs as memories struck her, vague recollections of a father, a caring man who'd taken her to the park, a man her mother had always instructed her not to speak of. Why had her mother concealed everything? Why did the old man claim to be her father? Unable to endure the thoughts any longer, Isabella set out for the truth. She rifled through old photos in her mother's room, but each one related to her father had vanished. Questions swirled chaotically in her mind. Hugh began noticing the shift in Isabella's demeanor. She was investigating the old man's tale, presenting a totalitarian challenge he could not allow. Immediately, he confronted her. "What are you doing? This doesn't matter. He's just a crazy old man," he stated firmly. Isabella had no more patience. She faced him, her eyes hard and resolute. "I want to know the truth." The overwhelming mendacity in her life propelled her forward. Isabella was determined to confront whatever had transpired in the past, to unearth the truth at any cost. With lingering guilt and anxiety, Isabella sought answers after restless days of pondering the identity of the old man. She resolved to meet an old family acquaintance, Aunt Catherine, who had worked as their family's housekeeper many moons ago, and might hold some fragments of truth about her lineage. One afternoon, Isabella arrived at Aunt Catherine's small apartment on the outskirts of Chicago, just as the sun's final rays kissed the house's roof. Inside, Aunt Catherine sat in her armchair, peering out the window. Even in old age, she maintained her sharpness and clarity. Taking a deep breath, Isabella sat across from her, an unease filling her chest as she didn't know how to begin. "Aunt Catherine, I need your help. I want to know about my father, Fred. Can you tell me about him?" Aunt Catherine studied her momentarily before letting out a sigh, seemingly aware of the story Isabella needed to hear. "Fred didn't abandon you, Isabella," came her soft yet significant voice. "That's just what your mother and Hugh wanted you to believe. The truth is quite another matter." Isabella's eyes widened in disbelief. "Then what actually happened? Why did my mother say that?" As Aunt Catherine recounted the story, Isabella's heart felt heavier with every detail. Aunt Catherine explained that Fred, the father Isabella believed had forsaken her and her mother, had actually been betrayed by her mother and Hugh, who conspired against him, driving him from the family. Everything she had been told throughout her life was a deception. "Your mother changed after she met Hugh," Aunt Catherine said, her tone thoughtful and somber. "Hugh manipulated everything. He sought power, and your mother could no longer be the woman you once knew." Isabella's heart shattered at these revelations. Aunt Catherine's words hit her with a force she hadn't expected, uprooting her past and stirring incalculable anguish. "So, my mother and Hugh drove my father out of the family?" Isabella queried, her voice trembling as she bore the weight of a newfound understanding. "Yes," Aunt Catherine confirmed. "They created conflict, rendering it impossible for Fred to remain. He had no family left to support him and ultimately became homeless, though the truth remained hidden from everyone." Feeling overcome by guilt, Isabella looked into Aunt Catherine's eyes, realizing that for years she had been under the grasp of lies. The woman she had loved and esteemed was responsible for the suffering of both her and Fred. Resting in turmoil, Isabella knew she had to change everything. She couldn't let these betrayals continue to inflict pain. As she prepared to leave Aunt Catherine's, a sudden thought crossed her mind. She couldn't let this end here. She needed to uncover every secret, whether it was confronting her mother or Hugh. Returning to the enchanted restaurant, determination burned fiercely within her. However, the elegance of the restaurant felt unchanged. It remained crowded, and Hugh wore his customary smug smile. Yet internally, Isabella knew nothing would ever be the same. The old man's image remained a powerful specter in her consciousness, and she was determined to take action. Early the next morning, Isabella resolved to search for the old man and learn from him what she needed to confront her own past. She gathered her resolve to face Hugh and her mother, vowing to expose the truth, unearthing every buried secret. Walking through the moonlit streets of Chicago, she searched for traces of him among the displaced, hoping he still existed somewhere amidst the forgotten. Continuing her search, she visited various neighborhoods where the marginalized lived, grilling her thoughts as challenges piled upon her. Then, as she turned a corner, she discerned laughter, mocking and cruel. Approaching with caution, Isabella's heart sank at the sight, a group of young thugs targeting a frail homeless man. There he was, Fred. His frail figure crumpled against the pavement, receiving blows to the face whilst gasping for breath. Isabella felt her heart ache as no onlookers intervened, just retreating into passivity. Fueled by desperation, she rushed forth, screaming, "Leave him alone!" But their cruelty persisted. One thug turned towards her, sneering with contempt, and Isabella shouted, her eyes welling with tears. Ignoring the risk, she lunged forward, gripping one assailant's arm. "Let him go," she pleaded, her voice breaking under pressure. But the gang was relentless, continuing their attack. Tormented by the scene, pain knifed through her heart, realizing how she had failed to act earlier. With her body seized by fear, she fell to the ground but sprang back up, her heart breaking. As Fred lay there, dim-eyed and nearing unconsciousness, she cried out, "Father!" For a fleeting moment, the gang paused, startled, but their laughter morphed into increased violence as they resumed. Just when it seemed there was no hope, an unexpected figure emerged from the shadows. A passerby intervened, shoving the thugs aside. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" the rescuer demanded, asserting authority. The assailants backed off, grumbling under their breath, thus freeing Isabella and Fred. "Father, it's me," she murmured urgently, but he remained unresponsive. As she cradled him in her arms, tears streamed down her cheeks. "Don't leave me. I found you. I'm so sorry." Slowly, Fred opened his eyes, a fragile smile touching his battered face. "My daughter, you found the truth," he whispered, love and warmth enveloping him despite his suffering. Overwhelmed, Isabella drew him close, grief rushing in. The pain and regret consumed her. As she held him, she felt her entire world shatter. She couldn't believe how many years had slipped by without helping him, letting him wallow in neglect and poverty. But now, she had touched the truth, and everything would be different. She hailed a taxi, indifferent to all else, knowing she had to get him to the hospital immediately. Supporting him, she sensed hope emanating from his faint, glimmering gaze. At the hospital, doctors swiftly took Fred for emergency treatment. Isabella remained anxiously outside the room, her heart heavy with guilt, as each tick of the clock felt like a penance for her years of neglect. After a while, the doctor emerged, promising that Fred would survive, though his recovery journey would be long. Isabella understood she had more to offer to right her past errors. Throughout Fred's hospital stay, she remained by his side, not leaving his presence. "Father, I'm so sorry I didn't know the truth before," she whispered, tears spilling from her eyes. "I'll do everything to make it right. I won't allow you to suffer like this again." Despite his weakness, Fred gazed at her with a faint smile, his voice quaking with love. "My daughter, you found the truth. I always believed in you." As profound emotion swelled within her, Isabella reflected, embracing the truth of their reality. Freeing Fred of the shadows of his past was now her commitment. After his hospitalization stabilized, she understood she could no longer delay returning to the enchanted restaurant to confront Hugh about everything he had done. Upon her arrival, the restaurant still exuded the same superficial allure, but Isabella felt a new sense of purpose form inside her. In confrontation, she found resolve. Confronting Hugh became an undeniable necessity. When Hugh noticed her, he donned that same smug expression, pretending as if her presence carried no weight. "Good day, Isabella," he mocked, feigning interest. "You don't look too happy. I don't have time for your games, Hugh." She cut him off, metallic steel lacing her words. "I know everything you've done, and you will face consequences." His surprise flickered across his face, but his bravado returned. "You're talking nonsense. You can't do anything." Unfazed, Isabella stepped closer, her unwavering gaze locked onto his. "You will pay for your actions. I won't let you escape." Though Hugh attempted to maintain composure, she could see the fear creeping into his eyes. She was not the weak girl he could manipulate any longer. She had changed irrevocably. Swiftly, she turned her back on him, resolute, and left the restaurant, knowing she wouldn't return until Hugh faced justice. Still, anxiety about confronting her mother loomed large, knowing she was responsible for concealing the truth and coercing her father from her life. Living in anger and resentment was not sustainable, yet forgiveness appeared daunting. Once home, Isabella sought her mother, who appeared as the strong woman composed in her childhood. Yet, facing her now felt like standing before a stranger, an unsettling air of judgment surrounding her. "Mother, why did you do it?" Isabella pressed, her voice trembling. "Why did you hide the truth about my father for so long? Why did you hurt both him and me?" Isabella's mother responded, her gaze distant. "You wouldn't understand," she replied, defending her actions. "Everything I did was for you, for our future." Isabella felt her heart clench in pain. "You can't hurt him and claim it was for my sake. You lied to me about everything." Her mother stood silent, the weight of the truth embedding deeper. The maelstrom of emotions swirled inside Isabella, unanswered questions burning in her heart. Why had her mother betrayed her father? Why bury the past? Her loving memories of her mother became overshadowed by dishonesty and deceit. Her mother remained still, lost in thought, avoiding eye contact, until finally she spoke, voice filled with both weakness and pride. "You wouldn't understand, but I did it for our future. Fred wasn't the man I could lean on anymore. He was too weak." Isabella stepped closer, the flames of anger surging inside her. "You've lied too many times. You can't escape the truth. It's not just my father you've hurt, it's me too." Facing the silence, Isabella pressed on. "I forgave much for our family, but I have to break free from the lies. You destroyed us. You turned my father into a homeless man, and now you expect my belief in your reasoning." The usual control her mother held began to crack as she lowered her head, filled with shame, staring at the floor instead of meeting Isabella's gaze. "Can't you forgive me?" she pleaded. Isabella felt guilt creep in but hardened her resolve. "I can't forgive you. Not now." Turning away, Isabella fled the house, anger coursing through her veins, propelling her forward. She could no longer linger beneath the shadow cast by her mother and Hugh. She wouldn't stop pursuing the truth until those who wronged her faced the consequences. Upon returning to the enchanted restaurant, an air of determination enveloped her. Everything appeared the same, but Isabella's outlook had irrevocably shifted. She strode directly to the bar where Hugh stood, stubbornly bearing his traditional smug expression. "Good day again, Isabella," he said, feigning normalcy, yet she sensed the tremors of worry lurking behind his facade. Without answering, she resolutely met his gaze, voice fierce and unyielding. "I'm aware of everything now, Hugh. How you deceived me and manipulated my family. I won't let you harm me or anyone again." A flicker of fear crossed Hugh's face. realizing she no longer felt imprisoned by him. She had emerged strong, donning a truth that he could not control. His voice dropped, revealing a new uncertainty. "You don't know the path you're crossing," he warned. Isabella did not waver. She had the strength to face him now. Turning her back, she exited without hesitation. Despite the weight in her heart from confronting Hugh, she needed to push forward. She couldn't tackle such monumental pain alone. She needed support and a genuine shift in her life. Determination renewed within her. She returned to the hospital where Fred was still recuperating. Upon entering, she spotted him lying quietly, frail yet filled with a flicker of light when he saw her. Taking his hand, warmth enveloped her, a reminder that his life would never be the same. Yet they now had the truth. "Dad, I'll never let you suffer like this again," she declared firmly. Fred managed a faint smile, his love shining through his tired eyes. "My daughter, I know you will. You are my hope." While guilt haunted Isabella, she was determined to pursue a path towards making things right. She wouldn't allow the past to vanish. She wouldn't let lies dictate her life any longer. With the rise of new days, Isabella grew resolute that facing the truth would redefine her future. She would not permit her mother to continue hiding, nor would she allow Hugh to evade repercussions for the pain he had caused. As she reached out to share Fred's story, curiosity began to fill over people around her, resulting in pressing questions about Fred and the betrayals rooted deep in their family's history. Soon news of the reality surrounding her housed in shadows began to surface. She contacted media outlets, newspapers and platforms that amplified her message. She spoke of the manipulations woven by Hugh and the lies from her mother, determined to expose the truth they both endeavored to conceal. With each disclosure, the perception of her mother and the restaurant shifted as those in the community began discerning the facade shrouding them. Isabella's mother, once a dominating figure in their household, now stood defenseless, stripped of her power when the truth emerged about how she had hurt both Fred and Isabella as she struggled to navigate the fray of contempt and shame directed at her. Although Isabella felt no joy in her mother's humiliation, she knew that accountability was necessary for healing. The only path through darkness was confronting the truth. She was committed to supporting Fred through his recovery, never leaving him alone in his time of need, healing not only his body but also the wounds in his heart. As days passed, Isabella would sit with him, sharing simple meals and laughter, feeling warmth return to her life. "I want to protect you from now on, Fred," she vowed, resolute in her decision to confront those who had deceived her. Weeks went by, during which the whispers grew louder, and revelations spread among the community, reshaping perceptions surrounding Isabella's mother. The transformation among the patrons quickly morphed, from admiration to anger, accusing her of manipulation and cruelty. Any apologies she offered collapsed under the weight of accountability. Within that societal spotlight, Isabella organized a significant charity event at the Enchanted restaurant soon after her mother's unmasking. It served as a poignant initiation of a new chapter in their lives, a charitable foundation dedicated to supporting the homeless named in Fred's honor. During the event, Isabella absorbed the respect now directed at her. No longer viewed as naive, she had reclaimed her dignity and justice for both herself and the community. Their journey revealed the profound strength found in facing truth, correcting past mistakes, and transcending the legacy of lies that defined so many lives. It was a testament that supporting loved ones sometimes unfolds through embracing difficult realities. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support inspires us to continue delivering heartwarming tales almost daily. Thank you for being with us, and we hope to see you again soon.